Colored fires. 52. Colored fires, such as are employed for illuminating gardens, shrubberies, avenues, buildings, etc., will now occupy our attention. Figure 90. Former for colored fire cases. Figure 91. Iron fork to support colored fires while burning. This species of firework is of very simple construction and requires only an ordinary amount of care in order to ensure its success. And it is very fortunate that so necessary an item in the program of a pyrotechnic display is one which can be relied upon for producing so beautiful and surprising an effect. I have known spectators more pleased with the colored fires in an exhibition than with any other of its features, and I am convinced that by a well-contrived introduction and arrangement of them, results may be produced at least as effective and satisfactory as by any combination of a much more elaborate character. But before entering upon the description of their manufacture, it will be necessary for me to remind you of some information that I have already given in the portion devoted to colored stars, in order that you may be induced not to prepare your colors for an exhibition until you know what you are going to prepare them for, that is, what sort of a place they are required to light up. What I have before said under the head of colored stars, with regard to the illuminating or reflective properties of this or that composition, must more than ever be borne in mind in the matter of colored fires. There are two kinds of fires used in pyrotechny, one burning with a considerable depth and richness of tint, but possessing a very moderate illuminating power, the other having great brilliancy and reflective power, but not the same depth of color. Now, with this plain distinction before us, there will be no difficulty in selecting such composition as will produce the desired effect. You have simply to make up your mind beforehand whether you require a color of considerable intensity, which you may gaze at while it burns, or one whose beauty will be seen to advantage, not in itself, but in its reflection upon those objects which are within reach of its illumination. The formulas which I shall give will be characterized as reflective, or intense in color. And if they are only made up with pure, dry, and fine ingredients, will, I am sure, give as good results as need be desired. In the first place, the preparation of the cases is to be considered. With regard to these, it must be remembered that they are required to burn with the composition, and must not be made too thick or hard on that account. The thicker they are, the more will their consumption interfere with the burning of, and impair the color produced by, the composition. A sheet of 60-pound or 70-pound brown paper cut up into 9 strips in the manner represented at Figure 89 will furnish you with some very good cases for the purpose. Each of these strips will be a little over 3 inches in width, which, in my opinion, is quite sufficient. The former for these cases is made of wood, and should be from 1.5 inches to 1 3/4 in diameter, and about 4 inches long, irrespectively of its handle. The drift for filling the cases may be of the same length, and 1/16 of an inch smaller in diameter, so as to admit of its passing easily in and out of the case. The difficulty that I have always experienced with regard to these cases has been this: they must be made of a certain thickness, in order that they may not be broken during the process of ramming in the composition. This process is, I believe, indispensable. At all events, I find it so, for if the composition be only pressed in loosely, and not rammed, it will fall to the ground in burning lumps, instead of burning slowly and evenly, in and with its case, and if the cases be made unnecessarily thick, either the composition will not burn freely enough, or its colour will be impaired, and this will be particularly the case with regard to green fires. Or, what is more probable still, both these calamities will happen at once, and render your production doubly ineffective. Now, my plan for obviating the difficulty has been to increase the diameter of the cases, and thereby to gain a greater body of composition in proportion to their thickness. This plan I have found to answer very well, and so I can conscientiously recommend it to you. Take then one of the strips of paper, cut as recommended above, and, pasting it all over on one side, roll it evenly round your former, having previously brushed a little paste over the former to prevent the paper sticking to it. Having rolled the strip up evenly and smoothly, take it off from the former, and set it by to dry. It will readily be perceived that these cases are among the easiest to make. And now we may pass on to the important subject of the compositions with which these cases are to be filled. The first of these is known as the common Bengal light. 53. It has a bluish-white color, and is called by some pyrotechnists artificial moonlight. Its composition is: number 1, niter 12 parts, sulfur 4 parts, antimony 1 part. Orpiment or realgar may be substituted for the antimony, in which case there will be less smoke. The above is the commonest sort of Bengal light. It gives a pretty effect, but has no great illuminating power. 54. White fire. White fire number 2. Niter 32 parts, sulfur 8 parts. Regulus of antimony 12 parts, red lead 11 parts. This is a French composition, introduced by Chertier, and is remarkable for its whiteness. It will be found a very useful composition, possessing a fair reflective power. White fire number 3. Niter 24 parts, sulfur 7 parts, realgar 2 to 3 parts, antimony 1 part. This I always find the most serviceable composition on the whole. It does not possess the intense whiteness of number 2, but has a slight tint of blue, and this difference alone would gain it the preference in my judgment. But it has also a greater illuminating power, and is decidedly the best composition that I have yet been able to find. The red lead recommended in composition number 2 can be purchased in fine powder, ready for use, at any painter's or chemist's shop. Yellow fire 55. We may now proceed to the formula for yellow fire number 4. Nitrate of baryta 36 parts, oxalate of soda 6 parts, sulfur 3 parts, shellac 5 parts. This composition produces a good color and has a moderate reflective power. Its principal merit lies in the fact that it will keep good for any length of time after it is mixed, and can be made with samples of nitrate of baryta, which will not produce a good green. Yellow fire number 5. Nitrate of soda 48 parts, sulfur 16 parts, antimony 4 parts, charcoal fine 1 part. This is decidedly the best formula for yellow fires as far as effect is concerned. But the nitrate of soda is so highly deliquescent that the composition must on no account be made up longer before use than is absolutely necessary. Yellow fires are not much used in pyrotechnic exhibitions. I suppose this is to be accounted for by the extraordinary power that they possess of giving to all objects, especially the human face, a ghastly and death-like appearance, anything but agreeable to behold. I have no doubt, however, that some of my younger readers, knowing this, will set a higher value upon the formulas for yellow fire, for the fun of showing off the spectators of their exhibitions to the greatest possible disadvantage. Especial notice should be taken of the complete annihilation of color in flowers, dresses, etc., by this yellow light. The effect is, of course, very similar to that produced by the burning of spirits of wine or naphtha, holding salt in solution. This latter is known as the monochromatic light, that is, a light in which only one of the colors of the spectrum is shown. Although I do not remember ever having seen a yellow fire used in any large exhibition of fireworks, I have given the above formulas in order to render my paper upon the subject as complete as possible. The next color with which we shall deal will be the green fire. 56. For this color I shall give 3 formulas, all of which I have found good, notwithstanding the universally acknowledged difficulty of obtaining a real green color. This difficulty has arisen, I believe, solely from the imperfections and impurities in the nitrate of baryta, which finds its way into the market. This salt should be prepared from the sulfate of baryta, and not from the carbonate. And I think I am right in stating that it is far more generally prepared from the carbonate than from the sulfate. When this is the case, you either get a very decent yellow color from the sample, or you get a salt which burns about as green as a very bad specimen of nitre will burn. My readers will readily understand that nitre ought not to be so green as to admit of this. And now, before giving the formulas, it only remains for me to say that if you have but a really good sample of dry nitrate of baryta in fine powder, you ought to be able to make from the following receipts a green fire which will answer any purpose. Green fire, number 6. Nitrate of baryta, 45 parts. Chlorate of potash, 10 parts, sulfur, 10 parts, antimony, sulfide, 1 part. The above formula gives a pure but pale green. It has a most intense illuminating power, and for this cause is very valuable. The addition of a little nitrate of baryta will render the composition more intense in color, but will detract from its rapidity of combustion, and therefore from its illuminative power. Number 7. Nitrate of baryta, 77 parts. Chlorate of potash, 5 parts. Sulfur, 12 parts. Charcoal, 2 parts. Orpiment or realgar, 2 parts. Shellac, 2 parts. Composition number 7 is a very old one, slightly altered to make it burn more freely. It gives a more intensely green color than number 6, but has not the same advantage with regard to its illuminative properties. It is, however, a very serviceable and inexpensive receipt to employ. We now come to the best of all the formulas for green fire that I have been able to meet with, and one which has thoroughly satisfied me. It is almost the same as that recommended by Chertier, the difference consisting in a slight decrease in the quantity of calomel, which enables the composition to burn rather more freely and adds to its reflective power. I have seen a real emerald green produced by this composition when good nitrate of baryta has been used, but in this, as in the case of all other green fires, if you do not succeed, you may generally fasten your suspicions upon the nitrate of baryta. Number 8. Nitrate of baryta, 40 parts. Chlorate of potash, 4 parts. Sulfur, 8 parts. Calomel, 8 parts. Charcoal, fine, 2 parts. Shellac, 1 part. I do not think that any better formula than this can be needed. It carries with it a better combination of intensity of color with intensity of illuminating power than any colored fire composition that I am acquainted with. Purple fire, 57. I have next a formula to offer which I think has considerable merits of its own. It produces a purple color of a very pleasing tint, and has also very considerable illuminating power. I have never seen a color of this kind employed in any pyrotechnic exhibition, but I believe it to be an effective composition, and one certainly that will make a change from the ordinary routine of white, green, and red. I shall dignify it by the title of Purple Fire, number 9. Niter, 48 parts. Sulphide of copper, 12 parts. Sulphur, 12 parts. Calomel, 6 parts. Arsenic, 6 parts. Nitrate of strontia, 6 parts. Chlorate of potash, 4 parts. Shellac, 4 parts. Charcoal, fine, 1 part. I trust that my readers will not be alarmed at the number of ingredients in the above formula. I can only promise them that the color produced is an extraordinary one, and cannot be produced by ordinary means. You will observe that I have recommended 12 parts of sulphide of copper. This must be the fused sulphide, or you may substitute for it equal parts of Chauthier's copper and sulphide of copper, or equal parts of Chauthier's, or of sulphide of copper and fine black oxide of copper. The arsenic employed in the formula may be either orpiment or realgar, but by far the best preparation of arsenic for this purpose is the finely powdered metallic arsenic. Formula number 9 is one of my own introduction. It possesses the advantages of being perfectly safe, deep-tinted, and decidedly illuminative. But I do not pretend to say that it can ever be admired to the same extent with the red and the green fires. These latter will always take the precedence, for their effect at night is so thoroughly theatrical and surprising that no other color, however beautiful or extraordinary, can hope to supersede them. I was once asked by a lady to make a brown-colored flame. The idea was so rich in theory that I never attempted to dissolve its charm by any failures in experimental practice. But had I succeeded to the utmost with this brown fire, no illuminating properties could ever have been obtained. One might as well have expected a good effect from a black star or a neutral-tinted sun. Red fire, 58. We come now to the most telling color of all, the red, or crimson, as it is usually called. In the preparation of the green fires, the purity of the nitrate of baryta is the most important consideration. In that of the red fires, the dryness of the strontia is the main point. This is most especially to be borne in mind, as success or failure depends upon it. A really good red-colored fire is often the making of an exhibition or its redeeming point. But in any case, it is a most important feature, and on that account is worth the expenditure of any trouble on its preparation. I shall give several formulas for red fires, each having its own characteristic properties. You will have but to determine the particular description of fire that is necessary, and I think you will find all that you need among the following compositions. Red fire number 10, nitrate of strontia 20 parts, chlorate of potash 3 parts, sulfur 5 parts, antimony 2 parts, charcoal fine 1 part. This formula gives rather a deep rose-colored flame and has a most intense illuminating power. But the composition is one on which the non-dryness of the nitrate of strontia has the most disastrous effects. It is, when properly prepared, a very useful composition for illuminating buildings, etc., etc. The next is a slower composition, having decidedly more intensity of color. It is a remarkably good composition, having considerable depth of tint and a very fair amount of reflective power. Its proportions are these. Number 11. Nitrate of strontia, 64 parts, chlorate of potash, 4 parts, charcoal fine, 5 parts, sulfur, 24 parts. The next formula is one of very slow combustion, but of the greatest depth of color. It has but a small illuminating power, and can therefore be employed only for certain purposes. Number 12. Nitrate of strontia, 48 parts, chlorate of potash, 4 parts, sulfur, 12 parts, calomel, 8 parts, Chertier's copper, 2 parts, charcoal fine, 1 part. This composition burns so slowly that if it be very much compressed, or its case be at all thick, much of its effect is lost. I should therefore recommend that it be laid in a heap upon a tile in order to be fired. Its beauty will then be seen to the greatest advantage. The following composition for red fire is the one which I have always found the most generally useful. Number 13. Nitrate of strontia, 70 parts, chlorate of potash, 6 parts, sulfur, 24 parts, charcoal fine, 2 parts, shellac, 2 parts. This composition, when employed in a case 1 3/4 inch in diameter, produces a magnificent effect, and is at the same time a very economical composition to make up. Its combustion does not appear rapid, and yet there seems to be no lack of illuminating power combined with intensity of color. It is, of all the compositions which I give, the one best adapted for the use of young, aspiring pyrotechnists, as very certain in its results, very inexpensive, and very easy to prepare. Thus we are brought to the close of our list of compositions for colored Bengal fires. I trust that this list will be found to contain all that you require, and contain it too in variety and abundance. But we have still to consider how these compositions are to be encased and fired. Colored fires to encase. 59. The cases made as directed above I will now suppose to be dry and ready for use. Your drift, with which the composition is to be compressed into the cases, is 1/16 of an inch smaller in diameter than your former. It will therefore pass easily within the cases which were made upon the former. Now cut some pieces of newspaper, or thin brown paper, into squares or circles about 3 inches in diameter. Place the flat end of your drift in the center of these, and turn down the papers round its sides, in the same way that papers or bladders are turned down over bottles or jars, when these are to be capped or covered. Then insert the drift, with the paper cap over it, into one end of the colored fire case, and push it through to the other end. Now withdraw the drift, and leave the paper cap in the end of the colored fire case. Next, place the case upright upon your driving block, with the end thus filled up, downwards, and put into it as much powdered clay as will, when driven, Occupy about half an inch in the end of the case. Drive this clay down firmly with a few blows of the mallet, taking care, however, not to rupture the case by exerting too great a force. The case is now ready to be filled with composition. This operation is to be done as follows. First, put in enough of the composition to occupy about half an inch in the case, and ram this down with a few light blows of the mallet. Then put in another quantity, and ram that down in the same way, and so on till the case is filled. I strongly recommend you not to put in more composition at a time than will ram down into the space of half an inch. You will find it easy to compress the whole of the composition equally and uniformly by attending to this simple piece of advice. And you will soon discover, if you do not already know, the advantage of uniform compression. When you have charged the case as far as you can with the drift and mallet, that is, to about 1/4 of an inch from the top of the case, press the mouth of the case into the composition from which you were filling it, until the case becomes full up to the brim. Over the flat surface of composition thus left, paste a piece of touch paper or any thin paper, taking care not to paste that part of the paper which lies against the composition, but only that which is to stick to the sides of the case. Colored fires to fire. 60. Your colored fire is now complete and ready for firing. This is the usual and most convenient way of preparing colors for exhibitions, but for your own experiments you may place a small quantity of the composition to be tried upon a tile or brick, not spreading it about, but piling it into a pyramidal heap, to be lighted at the top. Many persons adopt this plan for exhibitions, but it is not good, because several of the best compositions burn too rapidly when unconfined by a case. I only beg that you will do me the justice to remember that the formulas which I have given above are intended to furnish compositions suitable for burning in such cases as I have described, and not, as a general rule, adapted for open and loose burning. My plan all along has been this, to find compositions of sufficient freedom of combustion to enable them to consume their case, to give a powerful light, and not to burn out too rapidly. I think I have succeeded in gaining the first two of these qualities in the compositions themselves, and the third by compressing them closely in cases. It is very much better to put into each case 2 different sorts or colors of fire, making the fire, for instance, change from white to red, or from green to purple. But if this be done, and more than one case is to be burning at a time, of course an especial regard must be had to the contrast of color. You should never burn a yellow with a red fire, or a yellow with a white. Green with red, yellow with purple, white with red, make the best contrasts. But, for my own part, I never burn 2 Bengal fires of different colors at once. If the fires have any illuminative power at all, they are pretty certain to neutralize one another's effect, and so give you a very poor and unsatisfactory return for your outlay. It is very true that red and green are complementary colors, as they are called, and look very well side by side, but the effect produced upon an object by illuminating it with a red and green light is anything but complementary to the object, or to the colored fires themselves. If you wish, however, to try the effect of the contrast, use compositions possessing the greatest depth of color and the least reflective power. In this case, the fires themselves will be complementary one to another, and their non-illuminative properties will effectually prevent any confusion of reflection. That what I have said above is true, any one may discover by getting 2 pieces of stained glass, one of a rich red, the other of a rich green color. Let these colors be thoroughly transparent, and if you place one before the other and attempt to look through them, you will find that you have a medium through which very little can be seen at all. The cases of colored fire, made as directed above, must not be placed perpendicularly to be fired, but horizontally. The reason of this is very simple. While they are burning, a sort of boiling lava is formed, which is the refuse of the combustion, and this will considerably clog the flame and rob it of much of its light if allowed to remain at the mouth of the case. Now, if the cases be placed horizontally, this lava will fall away as it forms, and leave the fire to burn without impediment. All that it is necessary to do to give the cases this horizontal position is to drive 2 long, stout nails into a post horizontally, about 1.5 inches apart, and lay the case on these. Colored fires should, as a general rule, be fired at a distance of about 3 or 4 feet from the ground. But as one cannot always find nails of the proper sort for these purposes, especially when at a distance from one's own stores, I have sketched for you an iron which I always use, figure 91. And which I am sure you will find convenient. It is made in the shape of a tuning fork, with a screw at its handle. This screw is simply twisted into a gimlet hole in a post, and is easily put up or removed. I must not omit to say a few words with regard to the placing of colored fires. This must depend mainly upon individual taste, but a few hints may not be out of place. I cannot help thinking that the best and most effective way of displaying colored fires is to conceal the fire itself and let only its illumination or reflection be seen. Let any of my readers keep his spectators at a distance of 20 or 30 yards from the colored fire, and hold up a tray or piece of board in front of the fire, of such a size as will conceal only the fire itself. I think it will be generally admitted that the beauty of the piece is much enhanced by this simple contrivance, and if it be thought so, then it becomes a consideration whether it would not be better to use the most illuminative colors always out of sight, in such a position that their effect only can be seen. For instance, if there be a large tree conveniently at hand, place your color on that side of it which is away from the spectators, so that the trunk of the tree is between them and the colored fire. This plan I have always found to give a most charming result. But it must be remembered that anything but highly illuminative colors cannot be employed in this manner. You will, of course, find objectors to the plan mentioned above. There are many people who will tell you, "No, I like to see the light itself, as if gazing on the sun or moon, except for astronomical purposes, could ever give half the pleasure that the sight of a fine sunlit or moonlit landscape can impart." What would a fairy scene in a pantomime be worth if you saw some of the green room myrmidons, with a pot of beer in one hand and a lucifer match in the other, lighting a heap of composition on a tile beside the stage, and then saw the composition burst into a smoky flame, but were prevented from seeing the effects of its color? This suggests to me another branch of my present subject, which some of my readers may consider an important one. Colored fires for theatrical purposes. 61. In the event of private theatricals, you may not, or your friends may not, like their drawing-room to be filled with a strong sulphurous smoke, which is pretty certain to hang about the drapery of the room and the dresses of the company for some unpleasantly long time. I shall therefore give you now 2 or 3 formulas for colored fires which may be safely used in a room, and which contain no sulphur. But first let me give you this caution, which it is most highly important that you should attend to. Never burn any colored fire composition indoors, or in any enclosed space, which contains orpiment, realgar, or any preparation of arsenic amongst its ingredients. The fumes from such compositions must be very injurious. They can only be used with safety out of doors. Colored fires for theatrical purposes. White, number 14. Chlorate of potash, 12 parts. Nitre, 4 parts. Sugar, 4 parts. Stearine, 1 part. Carbonate of baryta, 1 part. This does not give a pure white light, for it is impossible to get a real white without sulphur. But when used to overpower theatrical lamplight, is to all intents and purposes white. Yellow fire, number 15. Chlorate of potash, 6 parts. Nitre, 6 parts. Oxalate of soda, 5 parts. Shellac, 3 parts. Nitrate of baryta may be substituted for nitre in the above formula with advantage, provided it be very dry and fine. Green fire, number 16. Chlorate of potash, 2 parts. Sugar, 1 part. Nitrate of baryta, 1 part. This green color is but faint in itself, but gives a very good reflection. Red fire, number 17. Nitrate of strontia, 4 parts. Chlorate of potash, 1 part. Shellac, 1 part. These colors are for the most part very rapid in their combustion, and therefore may be used in cases, if you please. But as colored fires for theatrical purposes are only required to last a short time, the more brilliant they are during that time, the better.